was the Lady Chatterley's Lover trial,
Oh,
where
really?
we got a copy of Lady Chatterley Lover in advance. So we all read it, of course, and we were rather hoping, if anything, that it would be banned, and then we'd be the only people who read it. It was permitted. So,
So what did he do around that?
I think he gave.
He was one of the witnesses. Richard Hoggart.
Actually, in person a witness or a written submission?
No, he was a witness, but
I knew Richard Hoggart wasn't he?
Richard Hoggart, who we didn't actually meet more than once or twice, but we had a great deal. It wasn't time for Richard Hoggart.
I certainly remember meeting him, yeah.
Oh, yes, he came to see us in Oxford and they recorded a conversation. But I remember Richard Hoggart ringing up and asking Raymond if he would come along and be a witness.
Yeah, so that was basically expert witness on the literary merit of the book.
Exactly, yeah. So what did he actually, did you say he did present at the trial?
He did.
Yes,
yeah.
I think
he did. Right, sorry. So and what kind of, and he was doing the literary merit, he was giving a view on the literary merit, right?
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry, got you now. Yeah, that sounds fascinating.
I remember it. Not that I've read the testimony or anything.
Oh, I wished I could read that. That sounds great.
Well, it's probably on record somewhere.
I mean, it probably is on record, isn't it? We ought to look that up.
Yeah, so there were a lot of key events during the 1960s where we seem to remember him getting really quite involved. And I think at that time he was felt politically very strongly about things and had a great deal of enthusiasm for the possibility of significant change.
Real change, yeah.
Yeah. We were actually in France and we had the news of the invasion of Czechoslovakia and obviously recognised it as a great disaster.
I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I might have seen a headline of it in Paris. I don't know exactly. We were certainly on holiday at the time.
Yes, I remember.
Hearing bits of news while we were sort of on the shores of the Mediterranean swimming.
Yes, and I think some of the kind of political impetus of the 60s dissipating the 70s.
Yeah.
I remember Raymond's kind of enthusiasm in involving similarly dissipating.
Yeah. Did you get a sense that he was, his political impetus was declining? I mean, yeah.
Certainly. I think he's finding that the teaching of English he didn't like, it had gone away he didn't like. I'm not sure it's that. I don't know. There was some sort of funny politics which I never really followed.
Yeah,
it just didn't go satisfactorily.
Yeah. I got that feeling as well from what I've read. Yeah.
Oh, there's also an interesting extra on the political thing. I couldn't trace it. Where, Bülent Ecevit, who had been the left-wing prime minister of Turkey, at a certain point, and I don't know when, he arranged for some invite for him to give a talk on a purely as literature, because apparently he was quite a substantial literary figure.
Oh, right.
I don't know the details, but he's dead now, but I'm sure he's got he's got friends and family who would be happy to fill you in on this.
Yeah,
certainly he was attempting to arrange for him to an invite. Yes, okay, it was worth hearing him for himself, but it's also a form of political protection. Again, I don't know what happened to it, but you can find out of that. It's a good luck. Okay.
I'd be very interested. Just a question, just because my background's in English literature and I also studied at Cambridge, having gone from a mining town in northeast Derbyshire. I'm from Bolsover, so my father was a miner. So I have lots of resonances with your father's work, and my grandfather was from Wales, as I said, from South Wales, and also a miner. So there's all kinds of personal connections for me in what he writes about community. But I'm also interested in his work on literature. And I just wondered if you had a sense of his perception of writers like, when we're thinking about, Thomas Hardy, for instance, and I'm also interested in his views on D.H. Lawrence. I just wondered if you had any sense of where they sit within his perceptions on literature, if you have any ideas on that.
Let's leave that one to Merryn.
Yeah, Merryn has.
Yes,
I've read Marxism and literature, but I'm not an expert on this by any means.
He admired both Hardy and Lawrence and didn't admire Richard.
Do you get a sense of why, if there was any kind of sense of shared identity or background? I'm just curious.
Yes, I do think so. Yes, both Hardy and Lawrence came from fairly ordinary, they were both from provinces.
Yeah.
As was Raymond. And both of them were not from the class that could expect to go to university.
That's right, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. So I just wondered if you had any fellow feeling, because when I went for my Cambridge interview, I was told that I had an obsession with D.H. Lawrence and a chip on my shoulder consequently. And I was made to feel very uncomfortable about the fact that I had an interest in writers who I perceived as being close to my own origins, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think it's I just think, wondered what your kind of father's role or perspective around that would have been. Yeah.
Yes, I think he felt that the Cambridge syllabus from that point of view was very outdated. And I remember him going on about various aspects of sort of internal fights within the English department about who would get appointed and what the syllabus would be. Yeah. I mean, Anglo-Saxon was on the syllabus.
Yeah, no, that was Oxford. Oh, well, hang on, perhaps you would do it.
And you know, he told me various stories, because I mean, I went off the science direction and you know, statistics and things like that. And he was telling me the story about, I think it was the Anglo-Saxon exam, but it might have been Latin, where it's been marked up by the department, who gave the students sort of -1 mark for each mistake. For being English literature students, they weren't very good at the language. So they finished up with a range of marks from +20 to, which was the top mark, to -7.
That's not very good, is it?
Ludicrous it was that it was being marked in this way. And the other story was how he gave one of his students 80% because he thought it was a reception paper. That was very illegal. 80%. And so the first order of business at the next examiners meeting was what was the maximum and minimum mark that should be allowed to be given.
Yeah.
To which any scientist would say, well, obviously the maximum is 100, the minimum is 0. Yes. This is not how the English literature department would look at it.
-20 or something.
and they agreed that the maximum minimum should be, I think, 35 minimum and 65 maximum, or something ludicrous like that. And from then on, that was the basis on which everything should be marked. Which I replied, well, they've just halved the range, effectively. They're squeezing everybody into the middle range. Why don't they just mark a 0 to 100 and then double it or something?
Yeah, exactly.
It was, and I think he found himself at odds with the department in a way that he found very uncomfortable. But you know, it was a great life in terms of being able to do his work.
Yeah, but very stifling, I suppose, in terms of systems and structures, some of the traditions as well, I guess. Yeah.
And similarly, he got into being a fellow of a college. I mean, when he was appointed in Cambridge, was David Daches who'd...
David Daches, we bought his house.
Yeah, that Raymond took over his whole life, basically, because we bought his house. He got the job in Cambridge.
Yeah.
He took over Daches' fellowship in Jesus College, and we bought his house in Hardwick. And the guy literally just moved off to America.
Yeah, sort of use it.
Everything. But obviously, although he had experience being a student at Cambridge, being a fellow was a whole new experience. College politics, and down to the fact of, I mean, it pleased in some way to, you know, he got a nice room at a certain point, Coleridge's old room.
I know, I read that. That's wonderful. Yeah,
and, absolutely. You know, plenty of storage books and all that sort of thing, but plaque on the wall. But the whole business of college life, which again was changing an awful lot. When I went to Cambridge in '65, I think the first term they were having a vote on whether one should be allowed to bring women into lunch.
Oh my God!
By all the students. Oh yes,
yes. Positively antique, doesn't it?
And then I think in the last year, you know, one be allowed to bring women guests into dinner.
God.
Again, an interesting story I remember relaying was that the fellows of Jesus College had the same argument about should one be allowed to bring women guests to dine at high table, which the old fellow said, well, I could just about live with that, providing wives are specifically excluded.
I like
the last thing they wanted was their wife saying, oh, no, women can come in. You should they weren't having that.
Control.
And you know, it was a very funny environment. Again, I recall him talking about the professor of ancient Tibetan, who was a fellow, and would get about one student every 2 or 3 years. There wasn't that much demand for ancient Tibetan. Whereas the English department was flogging away with hundreds and hundreds.
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah.
Popular. They seemed very disproportionate, and of course, there's then a big load on all the fellows.
Yeah. Do you think he enjoyed his time there then, or do you think he found it quite sort of complex?
I think he, because of his background, he felt himself very much at odds with his own generation.
Yeah.
Whereas many of the students would be, being of a different generation, were thinking about things differently and more positively. So I think whenever I heard him talking positively about people, it was usually his students.
Students, the younger.
Whereas the fellows and so forth.
I mean, he must. I loved his piece, My Cambridge, which is just brilliant, isn't it? I mean, you know, and for me that was really powerful, because he describes the fact that we're supposed to be in awe of and inspired by these kind of rich, you know, culturally freighted people who've come to Cambridge with. And he found them a kind of braying, rather brash group of people. That's really clear that he then looks back and harks back to the kind of Welsh community that he's come from and sees more beauty.
That story about Carrington, Lord Carrington?
No, I don't know that one.
No, well, I think when Carrington was at university, there was some sort of dispute among students. As I heard the story, Carrington shouted out, "My ancestors came over with William the Conqueror," which Raymond replied, "Well, how are you enjoying it then?" His ancestors have been here a lot longer than William the Conqueror.
Yeah,